The melody escaped his lips without thought, the way breath leaves the body. Daniel Martinez pushed the mop across the marble floor of the executive suite, humming the tune his mother had sung to him 40 years ago in their small house in Albuquerque. The same tune he sang to his daughter every night before bed. He barely noticed he was doing it anymore. It was just part of the rhythm of his work, like the swish of the mop, the squeak of his cartwheels, the hum of the ventilation system in the empty halls of Hartwell Financial Tower. It was past midnight. The executives had all gone home hours ago, leaving behind their coffee cups and crumpled papers, their half-eaten salads and sticky conference room tables. Daniel had been cleaning office buildings for 11 years now, ever since Emma was born. Since her mother left them at the hospital. Since he realized no marketing degree could pay the bills as reliably as night shift janitorial work with benefits. His daughter needed health insurance. She needed stability. She needed a father who came home, even if he came home smelling like industrial cleaner and exhaustion. The lullaby was an old one. Mexican, probably. His mother never told him where she learned it. She just sang it when he was scared, when he was sick, when the world felt too big and he felt too small. The words were half Spanish, half humming, something about stars and safety and morning always coming. He sang it to Emma the same way. She was 6 now, and sometimes she asked him to teach her the words, but he could never quite remember them all. Just the melody, just the feeling it gave him, like being held. He didn't hear the door open behind him, didn't notice the woman standing in the entrance to the executive suite until she made a sound. Not a word, just a sharp intake of breath, like someone surfacing from deep water. Daniel turned. The woman stood frozen in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her face had the kind of angles that photographers loved. Victoria Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Financial. He'd seen her in the building directory, in the framed photos lining the hallways. He'd never seen her in person, and certainly never this late at night. She was staring at him. Her face had gone completely white. "I'm sorry," Daniel said automatically, stopping the mop mid-stroke. "I didn't know anyone was still here. I can come back." She didn't respond. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Her eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that made him take a step back. He tried again. "That song," she said. Her voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Where did you learn that song?" Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He'd been yelled at before for humming, for singing, for making any noise at all while he worked. Some executives wanted absolute silence, wanted to pretend the people who cleaned their offices didn't exist. He should have been more careful. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I'll keep quiet." "No." She took a step toward him, and her hand was shaking. "I need you to tell me where you learned that song. Please." The please surprised him. People like Victoria Hartwell didn't say please to people like him. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable under her gaze. "My mother taught it to me," he said, "when I was a kid. It's just an old lullaby." "What's your name?" "Daniel Martinez." "How old are you?" 42. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there were tears in them. Daniel had no idea what was happening, but every instinct told him to leave, to get out of this room before whatever this was got worse. "Where were you born?" she asked. This was getting strange. Too strange. Daniel gripped the mop handle tighter. "Albuquerque," he said slowly. "Look, I should really finish up and let you get back to whatever you need to do." "Were you adopted?" The question hit him like cold water. He stared at her. Nobody asked that. Nobody except Emma's teachers, sometimes, when they needed family history for school forms. Nobody just asked that out of nowhere. "I have to go," he said, but his voice came out wrong, too quiet. "Please," Victoria said, and she took another step toward him. "Please, I know this sounds insane, but I need to know. Were you adopted? From where?" At this moment, watching from his living space in another part of the city, 1,000 miles away in thoughts if not in distance, Daniel might have felt some connection to all of you who are watching from wherever you are right now. Sometimes we feel most alone in moments when someone finally sees us, really sees us, because we're not used to being visible. We're not used to mattering. If you're watching this, would you take a moment and comment where you're watching from? Sometimes knowing we're not alone, that our stories reach other people, that somebody out there is listening, that's the thing that keeps us going. Just a comment. Just your city, your country, anywhere. Let us know you're there. Daniel's hands were trembling now. He set the mop down carefully, leaning it against the wall. I was adopted from foster care, he said, in New Mexico, when I was 3. I don't remember anything before that. Victoria made a sound that might have been a sob or might have been something else. She reached into her suit jacket and pulled out her phone. Her fingers fumbled across the screen for a moment. Then she turned it toward him. The photo showed a small boy, maybe 2 years old, with dark curly hair and a gap-toothed smile. He was wearing a blue shirt with a cartoon dinosaur on it. Daniel had seen this photo before. Not this exact photo, but one like it. In his own file. In the documents his adoptive parents had given him when he turned 18. This is my son, Victoria said. His name was Daniel. He was taken from a grocery store parking lot in Albuquerque in 1985. He was 2 years old. I was 23. I looked away for 30 seconds to put groceries in the car. 30 seconds. And he was gone. The room tilted. Daniel reached out and gripped the edge of a desk to steady himself. No, he said. No, that's not possible. That lullaby, Victoria continued, and tears were running down her face now, cutting tracks through her makeup. I made it up. When he was a baby, I couldn't sing the real words to any song correctly. I always forgot them. So I just hummed and made up sounds and told him it was about stars keeping watch. I never sang it to anyone else. Never taught anyone. He was too young to remember me teaching it to him. But somehow you're humming it. 40 years later, you're humming my song. Daniel's chest felt tight. He couldn't get enough I have parents, he said. I have a whole life. You can't just show up and say I'm someone else. I'm not saying you're someone else, Victoria said, and her voice broke. I'm saying you might be my son. I'm saying there's a chance. Please, would you take a DNA test? Just to know. The rational part of Daniel's brain knew he should refuse. Knew he should walk out of this room and never think about this again. But there was another part, a part he'd buried a long time ago, that had always wondered, that had always felt like something was missing, that had never quite fit. I have a daughter, he said. Emma. She's 6. I can't just append her whole life because a stranger thinks she recognizes a song. I'm not asking you to append anything, Victoria said. I'm asking for test. One test. If it's negative, I'll never bother you again. If it's positive. She trailed off, and more tears fell. If it's positive, we'll figure it out. Together. Please. Daniel looked at her. Really looked at her. At the desperation in her eyes. At the way she held herself like she was afraid she might shatter. At the phone still extended toward him with a photo of a little boy who did, he had to admit, look a little like Emma. Okay, he heard himself say. Okay. 6 months ago, Daniel's life had been precarious but stable. He worked the night shift at Hartwell Financial Tower and 2 other buildings in the downtown corridor, cobbling together enough hours to cover rent on their 1-bedroom apartment in East Portland and Emma's after-school care. His daughter slept in the bedroom, and he took the couch. It was tight, but it was theirs. They had food. They had heat. They had each other. Then his supervisor at the cleaning company got replaced by someone who wanted to cut costs. New policies. Fewer hours. Daniel lost the contract at one building, then another. By the time he met Victoria Hartwell in that executive suite, he was barely making enough to cover rent. And that was only if he skipped meals and put off every other bill. But none of that was why he said yes to the DNA test. He said yes because he remembered things. Not memories, exactly. More like shadows of memories. A woman's voice singing. Soft hands tucking a blanket around him. The smell of something baking, something sweet. And then nothing. Just the foster homes, one after another, until the Martinezes took him in when he was 5. They were good people. They loved him. They gave him everything they could. But there had always been this gap, this space where something should have been and wasn't. Victoria arranged everything. A private lab. Expedited results. She gave him a personal number and told him to call anytime, day or night, if he needed anything. He didn't call. He went home to Emma and made her breakfast and got her to school and tried not to think about the fact that his entire understanding of who he was might be about to change. The results came back in 3 days. Victoria called him herself. "It's a match," she said. "Daniel, you're my son. You're really my son." He should have felt something. Joy. Relief. Something. Instead, he felt numb. He sat on the couch in his apartment, the phone pressed to his ear, and stared at the wall. "What happens now?" he asked. "Whatever you want to happen," Victoria said. "I'm not going to force anything. I just want to know you. I want to meet your daughter. I want to be part of your life, if you will let me." They met for coffee 3 days later at a place near his apartment. Victoria looked different in daylight, softer somehow. She brought photo albums, baby pictures, birthday cards she'd saved, a box of his clothes from when he was 2, still carefully folded and preserved. She cried when she showed him these things, and Daniel felt like he was watching it all happen to someone else. "I never stopped looking," she told him. "I hired investigators. I put up billboards. I did everything. But the trail just went cold. The police said he was probably taken across state lines, maybe to Mexico. They said the chances of finding him alive after the first 48 hours were almost zero. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't accept that he was gone." "Why were you at the office that night?" Daniel asked. "The night I was humming." "I'm always there," Victoria said with a sad smile. "I work until I can't think anymore. It's easier than going home to an empty house and wondering." They made plans to meet again. Then Victoria said something that changed everything. "I want to tell the board," she said. "I want to introduce you. Publicly." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because you're my son. Because I've spent 40 years grieving, and now you're alive, and I want the world to know. Because I want to give you everything I couldn't give you before." "I don't need anything," Daniel said. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. He needed health insurance for Emma's asthma medication. He needed to make rent. He needed to not have to choose between feeding his daughter and putting gas in his 15-year-old car. Victoria saw it on his face. "Let me help you," she said. "Please, let me do this one thing." So he agreed. And that was when everything fell apart. The announcement went public 2 weeks later. Victoria held a press conference at Hartwell Financial. She stood at a podium in front of cameras and reporters and told them the story. Her missing son, the decades of searching, the miraculous reunion through a half-remembered lullaby. She introduced Daniel, put her arm around him, called him her son in front of the world. The response was immediate and vicious. By the next morning, the internet had decided that Daniel was a con artist, a gold digger, a desperate janitor who had somehow manipulated a grieving billionaire into believing he was her long-lost son. The comment sections were brutal. People dug into his past, found his divorce records, his spotty employment history, every small mistake he'd ever made. They posted photos of him looking tired and disheveled after a night shift, compared them to photos of Victoria in designer clothes, and asked what a woman like her could possibly see in a man like him other than a way to steal her fortune. Someone leaked that he had a daughter from a brief relationship, that the mother had abandoned them both. The story got twisted. Now he was a deadbeat father. Now he was using his kid to manipulate Victoria's maternal instincts. Now the whole thing was an elaborate scam. Then the cleaning company fired him. Not officially for the publicity. Officially for poor performance. Lateness. Complaints about the quality of his work. All lies, but it didn't matter. They wanted him gone. Wanted to distance themselves from the scandal. And within a week, he couldn't find another job. Nobody would hire the guy from the news. The suspected con artist. The man trying to steal from Victoria Hartwell. He started missing rent payments. His landlord, who had always been understanding before, suddenly wasn't. Eviction notices appeared on his door. Emma started asking questions he couldn't answer. Why were people being mean to Daddy? Why did the kids at school say he was a bad person? Why couldn't they have pizza anymore? The worst part was the silence from Victoria. After the press conference, after the backlash started, she stopped returning his calls. Her assistant told him she was traveling. She was in meetings. She would call him back. She never did. Daniel understood. Oh, he thought he did. She'd realized her mistake. The DNA test must have been wrong. or he'd somehow tampered with it, or this was all just too complicated and messy and she wanted out. Fine. He'd been alone before. He could be alone again. But Emma deserved better. His daughter was 6 years old, and she was watching her father fall apart. Watching him sit on the couch at 2 in the afternoon because he had nowhere to go, no job to get ready for. Watching him water down the milk to make it last longer. Watching him take pills for the headaches that never went away anymore, the stress that felt like a weight pressing down on his chest every time he tried to breathe. "Daddy," she said one night, crawling onto the couch beside him. "Are we going to be okay?" And he lied to her, looked into her sweet face, those big brown eyes so much like his own, and told her everything was fine. They were fine. He loved her. That was all that mattered. But 2 weeks after that conversation, Daniel collapsed in the apartment. Emma found him on the kitchen floor, unconscious. The neighbor heard her screaming and called 911. At the hospital, they told him it was stress and malnutrition and exhaustion. They kept him overnight for observation. They gave him pamphlets about food banks and social services. They asked him if he had anyone who could help him. He said no, because as far as he knew, that was the truth. What Daniel didn't know was that Victoria hadn't forgotten him at all. She'd been watching, investigating, searching for the truth behind the smear campaign that had destroyed his life. And what she was finding was making her angrier than she'd been in 40 years. This story gets darker before it gets lighter, and maybe that's how a lot of our lives work too. We hit bottom before we find the strength to climb back up, or before someone reaches down to help us. If this story is reaching you right now, wherever you are, whatever you're going through, I want to ask you for something. Could you take a second to hit the like button on this video? Could you leave a comment, even just a word or two about what you're feeling? Could you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and maybe share this with someone who needs to hear it? And check the description below, because sometimes there's information there, resources there, other stories there that might matter. Your engagement, your comment, your like, it tells me that these stories matter. It tells me that you're listening. And sometimes that's all we need to keep going, the knowledge that someone, somewhere, is listening. The stories we tell each other about who deserves help and who doesn't, about who's lying and who's telling the truth. Those stories have power. They can destroy lives, but they can also save them. And this story was about to take a turn that nobody saw coming. Victoria Hartwell's office occupied the entire top floor of Hartwell Financial Tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, giving her a view of everything and everyone below. She'd built this company from nothing, turned a small investment firm into a multinational corporation. She'd done it alone, without a husband, without family, driven by the kind of ambition that only comes from having nothing left to lose. When Daniel disappeared, she'd been a single mother barely scraping by. She'd moved to Portland to get away from the memories, from the grocery store parking lot where it happened, from the police station where they'd taken her statement over and over as if repetition might change the outcome. She poured everything into work, made money, made more money, built an empire because what else was there to build? And then, 40 years later, she'd found him, her son, alive, humming the lullaby she'd made up in a tiny apartment in Albuquerque when she was 23 and terrified and didn't know how to be a mother but was trying anyway. The joy had lasted exactly 3 days before the board members started calling. Richard Chen, Chief Financial Officer, old money, old school. He'd been with the company since the beginning, and he'd made it clear from day one that he thought Victoria was too emotional, too impulsive, too much of everything. When she told him about Daniel, he'd smiled tightly and said he hoped she knew what she was doing. When she announced it publicly, he'd stopped smiling altogether. The press conference was on a Friday. By Monday, Richard was in her office with a folder full of documents. "We need to talk about your son," he said, dropping the folder on her desk. "He is my son," Victoria said. "The DNA test proved it. The DNA test proves that he's genetically related to you. It doesn't prove his intentions. Victoria, this man is a janitor with a criminal record and a history of unstable employment. He has a daughter from a relationship that ended badly. He's been fired from multiple jobs. And now, conveniently, he shows up in your life right when he's about to lose his apartment. He didn't show up in my life. I found him. I approached him. That's what he wants you to think. Victoria stared at him. What are you talking about? Richard opened the folder, spread papers across her desk. Background checks. Financial records. Photos of Daniel looking exhausted and unkempt. An old arrest report from when he was 19 for shoplifting, charges that had been dropped but still showed up in the database. Look at the timeline, Richard said. He starts working in this building 8 months ago. He takes shifts that put him here late at night. He makes sure to be on your floor. He hums a song that he somehow knows will get your attention. Victoria, this is a setup. He found out about your missing son, did his research, and orchestrated the whole thing. That's insane. Is it? Think about it. The lullaby. How many people could possibly know that song? Either he's your son, which means he somehow remembered a melody from when he was 2 years old, or he found out about it some other way and used it to manipulate you. Either option requires a level of planning that should concern you. Get out, Victoria said. I'm trying to protect you. Get out of my office. Richard gathered his papers, giving her a look that was equal parts pity and contempt. When this blows up in your face, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. He left. Victoria sat alone in her office and tried to ignore the seed of doubt he'd planted. Over the next week, more people came to her with concerns. Board members, executives, the company's legal team. They all had the same message, delivered in slightly different ways. Be careful. Protect yourself. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment. This man might not be who he says he is. And then the media picked up the story, and it wasn't about a miraculous reunion anymore. It was about a con, a scam, a desperate man taking advantage of a grieving woman. The narrative shifted so fast Victoria couldn't keep up with it. One day, she was a mother reunited with her son. The next, she was a fool. Her assistant started screening her calls. Her security team advised her to avoid public appearances. And Daniel, the man she'd spent 40 years searching for, became someone she couldn't be seen with. Not until this all died down. Not until she could figure out how to fix the story. But sitting in her office 3 weeks after the press conference, Victoria realized she wasn't trying to fix the story. She was trying to bury it. And that meant burying Daniel too. She picked up her phone and called her head of security. I need you to investigate Daniel Martinez, she said. Everything. Where he goes. Who he talks to. His financial records. His daughter's school records. Every single detail of his life for the past 40 years. I need to know if what the board is saying is true. And if it's not, the security chief asked, then I need to know who's lying and why. The investigation took 2 weeks. What it revealed made Victoria physically ill. Daniel wasn't lying. Every detail of his story checked out. He'd been in foster care in New Mexico. He'd been adopted by the Martinezes when he was 5. He'd moved to Portland for college, dropped out when Emma was born, and had been working night shifts ever since. His employment history was spotty not because he was a bad worker, but because he kept taking jobs that would let him be home during the day for his daughter. He'd been fired from dozens of positions for the same reason. Missing shifts when Emma was sick, turning down overtime because he had to pick her up from school, choosing his daughter over his career every single time. The criminal record Richard had mentioned. Daniel had shoplifted a package of diapers when he was 19 and had just found out his girlfriend was pregnant. The charges were dropped when he paid for them, and the store owner realized he was just a scared kid. Everything about Daniel's life pointed to one simple truth. He was exactly who he appeared to be, a struggling father doing his best with what he had. And Victoria had abandoned him. Let the board and the media destroy him while she hid in her office and worried about her reputation. The real revelation came when the security team dug into the source of the smear campaign. The leaked photos, the twisted stories, the carefully constructed narrative that Daniel was a con artist. All of it could be traced back to Richard Chen and 2 other board members who'd been trying to force Victoria into retirement for years. They'd seen Daniel as an opportunity, a way to make her look weak, emotionally compromised, unfit to lead. They'd destroyed an innocent man's life to score points in a corporate power play. Victoria read the report 3 times, each pass making her angrier. Then she called her assistant. Find Daniel Martinez. I don't care where he is or what it takes. Find him now. It took 6 hours. When they finally located him, he was in the emergency room at Providence Hospital. Emma was with a neighbor, Daniel had collapsed again, and this time it was worse. Dehydration, malnutrition, a stress-induced cardiac episode. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. Deep into the investigation, the security chief told Victoria something that she already knew in her heart but needed to hear spoken aloud. Sometimes the truth about a person's character is revealed not by searching through their past, but simply by paying attention to what they are doing in the present. We get so caught up in background checks and investigations and proving things that we forget to just look at what's right in front of us. If you've made it this far in the story, I want to ask you to do something that matters. Hit that like button. Leave a comment about what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Subscribe to this channel if you believe stories like this need to be told. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And check the description for more information, because sometimes the full story is bigger than what fits in one video. Your engagement, your attention, your willingness to listen and share, that's what keeps these stories alive. That's what makes them matter. Victoria Hartwell stood in her office with a security report in her hands and made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to let them win. Not the board, not the media, not the people who thought they could destroy her son a second time. She grabbed her coat and headed for the hospital. Daniel woke up to white walls and the steady beep of machines. His first thought was for Emma. His second was how much the hospital bill was going to cost. He tried to sit up and pain shot through his chest, forcing him back down onto the pillow. "Don't move." The voice came from beside the bed. Victoria was sitting in a chair, still wearing her suit, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "You had a cardiac episode. The doctors want you to rest." Daniel turned his head to look at her. "How did you find me?" "I've been looking for you. I should have come sooner. I'm so sorry." "You don't need to apologize. This isn't your fault." "It is, though." Victoria leaned forward, and he could see she'd been crying. "Everything that happened to you, all of it, it's my fault. I let them destroy you. I let the board and the media turn you into a villain, and I didn't do anything to stop it. I was a coward." "You were protecting yourself," Daniel said. "I understand. I don't want you to understand. I want you to be angry. I want you to yell at me for abandoning you twice." Daniel closed his eyes. He was too tired for this. Too tired for anything. "Where's Emma?" "She's with your neighbor, Mrs. Park. I've already arranged for a full-time nanny to help until you're back on your feet. And I've paid your rent for the next year. And the hospital bills are covered. I can't accept that. You can and you will." "Daniel, listen to me. I'm not giving you charity. I'm giving you what's yours. What should have been yours for the last 40 years. I'm your mother. Let me do this." The word mother hit him harder than he expected. He'd had a mother. Martha Martinez had been kind and patient and had loved him even when he was difficult, even when he pushed her away, even when he told her at 16 that she wasn't his real mother and he didn't have to listen to her. She died when Emma was 2, and he'd never gotten to tell her he was sorry, never gotten to thank her for everything she'd given him. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Neither do I," Victoria said. "But we'll figure it out. Together." Over the next 3 days, Victoria visited him every morning before work and every evening after. She brought photo albums and told him stories about who he'd been as a baby. She met Emma, and his daughter fell in love with her immediately. Called her Grandma Victoria, held her hand, asked her a million questions about being rich and what it was like to live in a big house and did she have any pets. Victoria rented them a house. Not an apartment. A house. 3 bedrooms in a good neighborhood with a yard where Emma could play. She hired movers to pack up their apartment and transfer everything. She bought Emma new clothes and toys and enrolled her in a better school. She did it all without asking, without waiting for permission, just swept in and fixed everything like she'd been waiting 40 years to do exactly this. And for a moment, Daniel let himself believe it could work. Then the board found out. Richard Chen called an emergency meeting. Victoria was required to attend. Daniel was still in the hospital, recovering, when she walked into the conference room and found herself facing 15 hostile executives. "We need to discuss your recent financial decisions," Richard said. "Specifically, the money you've been spending on Daniel Martinez. He's my son. I can spend my money however I want. Not when it affects the company. Not when it raises questions about your judgment." "Victoria, You've given this man access to hundreds of thousands of dollars. You've moved him into a house you're paying for. You're supporting his daughter. And you're doing all of this while we still don't have a clear answer about whether he's really who he says he is. The DNA test proved he's my son. DNA tests can be manipulated. Samples can be contaminated. We need an independent verification. We need more time to investigate. I've done my own investigation, Victoria said, and I know exactly what I found. I found a good man who was destroyed by a smear campaign that originated from this very room. I have security footage of you meeting with the reporters who broke the story. I have emails proving you leaked his background information. I have everything, Richard. The room went silent. Richard's face flushed red. You're accusing me of what? Exactly. I'm accusing you of trying to destroy my son to make me look weak. I'm accusing you of corporate sabotage, and I'm giving you two options. You can resign quietly, or I can go to the authorities with what I know. You out of your mind? Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, you're the one who's been lying. You're the one who leaked confidential information. You're the one who committed fraud by planting false stories in the media. So yes, Richard, resign, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. Watching this happen from his hospital room through a phone call from Victoria's assistant, who was keeping him updated, Daniel felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride that Victoria was standing up for him. Terror that this was all going to collapse. And underneath it all, a deep exhaustion that came from spending your whole life fighting just to survive. In this moment, as the battle lines were being drawn and powerful people were choosing sides, there's something important to recognize. When someone finally stands up for you, when someone finally sees the truth and decides to fight, that's when the real resistance begins. That's when the people who've been comfortable with injustice start pushing back hard. If you're still watching, if this story matters to you, I need you to do something. Like this video, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, share it with your friends, your family, anyone who needs to hear that standing up for the truth is worth the fight. Check the description for more stories like this. Because these stories don't spread themselves. They spread because people like you care enough to pass them on. They matter because you decide they matter. Richard didn't resign. Instead, he launched a formal investigation into Victoria's financial decisions. He brought in external auditors. He called board votes. He leaked more stories to the press, this time positioning Victoria as an unstable CEO who was bankrupting the company to support a con artist. The stock price dropped. Shareholders started asking questions. And Victoria, for the first time in her career, found herself fighting for her position. But she didn't back down. She hired the best lawyers money could buy. She held a press conference and presented the evidence of the smear campaign. She looked directly into the cameras and said, "This is my son. He was stolen from me 40 years ago, and I will not let anyone take him from me again." The public reaction was mixed. Some people believed her. Others thought she was delusional. But the one thing nobody could ignore was her conviction. She wasn't wavering. She wasn't backing down. She was a mother protecting her child, and she would bang down everything she'd built before she let them win. Daniel watched it all from the hospital, then from the new house Victoria had rented for them. He watched her fight for him on the news, in boardrooms, in courtrooms, and he realized something he hadn't understood before. She wasn't fighting for him because he was convenient or because she felt guilty. She was fighting for him because she loved him, because he was her son. And that meant something to her that was bigger than money or reputation or any of the things the board thought she cared about. For the first time in his life, Daniel understood what it meant to have a mother who would fight for him. And it terrified him almost as much as it filled him with hope. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in the main conference hall at Hartwell Financial. Victoria had called it herself, over the objections of Richard and half the board. She made it open to the press. She made it mandatory for all executives. And she told Daniel to be there. He stood in the parking garage outside the building, wearing a suit Victoria had bought him, feeling like a fraud. Emma was at school. The nanny Victoria hired, a kind woman named Grace, was going to pick her up and take her to the park. Normal things. Except nothing about this was normal. "You don't have to do this," Victoria said. She'd driven him here herself, refusing to let him take a bus. "If you want to leave, We can leave right now. I'll handle it. What happens if you lose? Daniel asked. Then I lose. But you'll still be my son. The house is in your name. The trust fund for Emma is already set up. They can take the company, but they can't take you away from me again. Daniel looked at her. She'd aged a decade in the past month. The stress of the fight showed in every line on her face, every gray hair she hadn't bothered to cover. And she was doing it all for him. A man she barely knew. A son she'd been separated from for 40 years. Okay, he said. Let's go. The conference hall was packed. Shareholders filled the seats. Press lined the back wall. Daniel saw Richard Chen in the front row, looking confident and smug. Victoria took the podium. Daniel sat in a chair beside it, visible to everyone but not speaking. Not yet. Thank you all for coming, Victoria began. I call this meeting because there's been a lot of confusion about recent events. About my son. About my decisions. About my fitness to lead this company. So I want to set the record straight. She pulled up the first slide on the screen behind her. A photo of Daniel as a toddler. The same photo she'd shown him that first night. The same gap-toothed smile. This is Daniel Hartwell. My son. He was taken from me in 1985 when he was 2 years old. For 40 years, I searched for him. I never gave up. And this year, I found him. Not because he came looking for me. Not because he wanted money. But because I heard him humming a lullaby I made up when he was a baby. A lullaby nobody else knew. She pulled up the next slide. The DNA test results. Certified. Verified. Undeniable. This is proof that Daniel is my biological son. But some people in this room have suggested that DNA tests can be manipulated. That I'm being deceived. So I had 3 independent labs run their own tests. Here are the results from all 3. 3 more slides. 3 more positive matches. I've also been accused of financial irresponsibility, of spending company money on my son. So let me be clear. Every dollar I've spent on Daniel and his daughter has come from my personal accounts. Not company funds. My own money. Earned over 40 years of building this corporation from nothing. And I will continue to spend my money however I see fit. She paused, looking directly at Richard. What I won't tolerate is members of this board conducting smear campaigns against my family. What I won't tolerate is corporate sabotage disguised as concern for the company's well-being. She pulled up another slide. Emails between Richard and a reporter. Messages coordinating the leak of Daniel's background information. Proof of everything she'd accused him of. Richard Chen and 2 other board members orchestrated a campaign to destroy my son's reputation in order to make me look weak. They leaked confidential information. They planted false stories. They destroyed an innocent man's life for their own political gain. The room erupted. Shareholders stood. Reporters shouted questions. Richard was on his feet, his face purple with rage. That's a lie, he shouted. Those emails are taken out of context. I was trying to protect the company from a con artist. Then explain this, Victoria said, and pulled up the final slide. A recording of a phone conversation between Richard and a board member, discussing how they could use Daniel to force Victoria into retirement. How they could spin the story. How they could make her look unstable. The recording played for 3 minutes. When it finished, the room was silent. I've submitted all of this evidence to the authorities, Victoria said. Richard and the others involved will face criminal charges for fraud and corporate sabotage. Effective immediately, they are removed from the board. Security moved in. Richard was escorted out, still shouting about lawsuits and defamation. The other 2 board members followed. Victoria turned to Daniel. I'd like to introduce you to my son, she said. Not as a victim, not as someone I'm trying to save, but as the person he is. Daniel, would you like to say anything? Daniel stood on shaking legs, walked to the podium, looked out at the sea of faces. I didn't ask for any of this, he said. I was just trying to take care of my daughter. I was just trying to survive. And then Victoria found me, and I thought maybe things could be different. But instead, everything fell apart. I lost my job, my reputation, almost lost my daughter. His voice broke. He took a breath. But Victoria didn't give up on me, even when everyone told her to, even when it would have been easier to walk away. She fought for me, not because I'm a billionaire's son or because I have some grand destiny, but because I'm her son, and that means something to her. And I think that's what this is really about. Not money, not power, just a mother and a son trying to find each other after 40 years. The applause started slowly, then built. By the time Daniel sat back down, half the room was standing. The vote happened 20 minutes later. Victoria retained her position as CEO with an overwhelming majority. The board was restructured. New policies were put in place to prevent the kind of sabotage that had happened. And Daniel, who'd started the day as a janitor, ended it as the son of one of the most powerful women in the country. 3 months later, Victoria created the Daniel Hartwell Foundation. Its mission was to support single parents, particularly those who'd aged out of foster care or had been separated from their families. It provided housing assistance, job training, childcare support, and legal aid. Everything Daniel had needed and couldn't get. The foundation's first headquarters was in the building where Daniel used to work as a janitor. His old supervisor was fired. The cleaning staff got raises and benefits and stable contracts. And Daniel, who'd spent years being invisible, became the foundation's public face. He didn't become wealthy overnight. Victoria was careful about that, not wanting to overwhelm him or create resentment. But he had stability. He had a good job coordinating the foundation's programs. He had a relationship with his mother that grew deeper every day. And Emma had a grandmother who spoiled her relentlessly and loved being called Grandma Victoria. The media eventually moved on to other stories. Some people still thought Daniel was a con artist. Others thought Victoria was delusional. But most people, when they heard the full story, when they saw the evidence and listened to Daniel speak, they understood. They understood that sometimes miracles happen. Sometimes stolen children come home. Sometimes justice, even 40 years late, still arrives. There's a moment in every story like this, right near the end, where we look back and see all the small choices that led to this point. Daniel could have refused the DNA test. Victoria could have given up when the board pushed back. Either of them could have decided the fight wasn't worth it. But they didn't. They kept going. They kept believing that truth mattered, that family mattered, that standing up for what's right mattered even when it cost them everything. If you've stayed with this story all the way to the end, I want to ask you one more time. Hit that like button. Leave a comment about what this story meant to you. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Share it with someone who needs to hear that fighting for the truth is worth it. And check the description because there's always more to the story. Your engagement, your voice, your willingness to care. That's what makes these stories spread. That's what makes them matter to others who are going through their own struggles. 6 months after the shareholder meeting, Daniel stood in the foundation's main office and looked at the wall of photos. Families they'd helped. Single parents who'd gotten housing. Kids who had stable homes now. People who'd been invisible, just like he'd been, who were finally being seen. Emma ran into the room, still wearing her backpack from school. Grace followed behind her, apologizing for the noise. But Victoria, who was sitting at her desk reviewing grant applications, just laughed and held out her arms. Emma ran to her grandmother and started talking about her day, about the art project she'd made, about the friend she'd invited over for the weekend. Daniel watched them together and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because the past 40 years hadn't happened, but because despite everything, despite the loss and the pain and the years of being separated, they'd found each other. They'd fought for each other, and that meant something. In the end, maybe that's what all of us are searching for. Someone who will fight for us when we can't fight for ourselves. Someone who will see us when we're invisible. Someone who will believe in us when everyone else has given up. Daniel had spent 40 years looking for that, not even knowing what he was looking for. And then a melody, a half-remembered lullaby hummed while pushing a mop across a marble floor, had brought him home. He walked over to where Victoria and Emma sat together, bent down, and kissed the top of his daughter's head. Then he did something he never thought he'd do. He kissed Victoria's cheek and said, "Thanks, Mom." She smiled. The kind of smile that comes from 40 years of grief finally releasing its hold. The kind of smile that says, "You're home now. You're finally home." And outside, the city continued its noise and chaos and endless movement. But in that small office, in that moment, Three people who'd been lost found exactly where they belonged. Together.